Hi, everyone. My name's Bree, and I am proud to be a director on the board of directors for the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. Welcome to the last plenary session, which is really sad. It always goes by so quickly, and I didn't get to talk to or see half of the things that I want to, but I am glad that it'll be available online for me to check out afterwards. First, I would like to introduce a message from one of our sponsors, BC Housing.
Hi there. I'm Jennifer Breakspear, Vice President of Operations at BC Housing. I'm speaking to you from the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I hope that you all have a wonderful experience of learning and connection at the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness Conference being held on the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Creating more safe, secure, and affordable housing is a priority for us at BC Housing. But housing is just the first step. To help foster a sense of home and belonging, we're also committed to helping those in communities across British Columbia have what they need, not just to survive, but to thrive. Essential to our work are partners with deep roots in their communities. I know there are over 100 attendees from BC with you in Halifax this week, including folks from BC Housing. Partnering and learning with organizations across the country to bring positive change in addressing homelessness is critical. We can't succeed without partners like you who are gathered at this conference. A sense of home goes beyond housing. It's where we feel safe, supported, and surrounded by people who accept us for who we are. On behalf of BC Housing, I want to extend my gratitude to all of you for your important work, and I look forward to building these connections for years to come. Thank you.
Now I would like to ask Alex Nelson and Pamela Spurvey to the stage. These are two peers that were involved in helping us plan this conference.
We have a few of our team members coming to the stage with us as well. Hello, everyone. Wow, it's really exciting to be standing here looking out at such an incredible crowd of people. My name is Alex Nelson. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am an uninvited guest in Jabuktuk, unceded and unsurrendered Mi'kmaq territory. I'm the Community Engagement and Research Specialist at the National Right to Housing Network. Some of you may have been in sessions on the right to housing. And I am, yeah, clap for that, yeah. Housing is a human right. And I sit with pride in my lived experience of homelessness as a queer, disabled advocate for housing rights and housing justice. I've learned how to do this work from my peers, and I'm grateful for their time and care. I've co-chaired the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network for over a year. This role has brought me joy, beauty, and love. Joy because people with lived experience share their humor and hope in spaces where I hope you see this for the gift that it is. Beauty because we are strong and we hold space even when we are struggling. And love because even during challenging moments, I know I have a community that will hold me. Thank you. It takes a lot for me to be vulnerable in this way. But I owe it to you, the people with lived experience who are here, sharing the parts of yourself where the hurt still lives, where you are tender and where only the deepest care can reach. I see you. We see you. And I hope that we see each other. This takes a moment to say, but everything to give. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being here. The conversations and spaces in between will keep us well until we see each other again.
Thank you, Alex. Tansei, hello. My name is Pamela. I'm from Treaty 6 territory. My homeland is Beaver Lake Cree Nation. My spirit name is White Eagle Woman. I am proud to share my Indigenous voice to create understanding and connection. I sit on the Canadian Lived Experience Network and the National Indigenous Housing Network and the Women's National Housing and Homelessness Network. And I do a lot of advocating within my community to create change and sustainable change and to support others with lived experience to have their voices heard. One of the things I want to say is please take care of yourselves when you go home. Sit with this. Sit with everything you've had, all the heaviness and the hurt, and move your way through it. Take care, have self-compassion for yourself, and continue to advocate for your communities, because you can see from this conference how many of you are advocating to create change. So take a deep breath and remember to share of yourself. I've met so many people along the way that were so good and so caring. My heart is so full. Thank you to the peers who have quietly supported so many people throughout this conference, to the elders. Thank you. Thank you for sharing a piece of you with us. I felt so welcomed and loved in your territory. Thank you to the Friendship Center and to Pam and Debbie, who made us feel so much love and feel so much connection. I'd like to give a hand to them. And also to their beautiful staff who have been so helpful throughout this conference and for sharing your ceremony and your songs with us. And so and thank you for the peers who volunteered their time in the Lived Experience Lounge and the host committee to bring my voice throughout the conference and being part of this process with you, involving me in your planning for the conference. It was such an honor to be a part of that committee. There was a beautiful moment that I want to share with you. There was a girl that was in the lobby, and her heart was heavy, and she was having a really hard day, and she had heavy tears. And I took her up to the elder room, and I sat her with an elder. And that elder sat with her in her pain, and I seen her the next day, and she had a beautiful smile on her face. And she said, thank you. She goes, she made me feel so loved, and she understood me. She's like, she knew things. I'm like, they do. And yeah, so it was that's just one of the many beautiful moments that I've heard from so many of the other peers. And so I really want to thank you for that. And so I'm turning it back to you, right? So yes, thank you.
I also want to say thank you to the Cleland team members, the members of the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network who are here on the stage, Veronica Snooks, Renee Adams, Debbie McGraw, and Phoenix Winter. Thank you for all the work that you do. And thank you to our team members who couldn't be here today. We're thinking of you, and you are always here with us. We got some really amazing feedback from our peers who are here at the conference today for how to make this space safer and more inclusive, and we are going to work to grow and work hard to improve and learn. Your thoughts allow us to build more inclusive spaces and a stronger movement for justice in housing. Lived experience is what makes this space so impactful. Thank you as well to Pamela for sharing your teachings with me, and thank you to you all. Thanks to the lived experience speakers. Every session I witnessed people with lived experience sitting in their power and bringing accountability. Thanks to the Lived Experience Leadership Award recipients who brought your vulnerability and trust. I encourage us all to hold in our hearts the message that we are moving together past nothing about us without us to nothing without us. I say this to you, the peers, the advocates, the leaders. Your lived experience is your power. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex and Pamela. Nothing without us. It's a good takeaway message. And thank you to all of the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network and all of the contributions you've made with your knowledge and expertise. Next, I'll be introducing BC Omojola. I'd like to invite her up here. BC is a fellow board member on CAEH. She's also a human resources professional with over 20 years cross-functional experience. She's been serving in this capacity for several years within the financial services industry, implementing the human resources strategy while managing the delivery of HR services, including recruitment, talent management, performance management, total rewards, learning and development, as well as policies. She's a certified human resources leader with the Human Resources Professional Association, holds a Master of Business Administration degree in management from Cranfield University, and has a Bachelor of Engineering degree with honors. BC, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our keynote speaker, the Honourable Senator Wanda Bernard. Senator Bernard is the first African Nova Scotian woman to be appointed to the Senate of Canada, representing the province of Nova Scotia and her hometown of East Preston. Senator Bernard champions issues impacting African Canadians and people living with disabilities. She's particularly invested in human rights, employment equity, and mental health through her involvement in community projects, her social work career, her time with the Dalhousie School of Social Work, and now her work in the Senate. Senator Bernard has maintained a deep dedication to social and racial justice. Senator Bernard advocates for reparations for the historical and continued anti-Black racism impacting the lives of African Canadians. Please join me in welcoming Senator Bernard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I thank you for your introduction. Thank you for inviting me to be here at this conference today. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. I've entitled this talk, Becoming Change Leaders. We'll go to the next slide, please. When I was preparing for today, I said to myself, I don't have direct experience with homelessness. I've not worked directly in the homelessness field. I don't have lived experience with homelessness. So why was I invited here? I was invited to come to hopefully send you off with some inspiration. I was invited to come to share with you, probably based on some of the work that I've done. So I'll talk with you a bit about my journey to the Senate. I want to talk about the role of a senator because I want to specifically talk about how we may bring the Senate more closely to discussions around homelessness, and then the whole idea of creating social change, anti-oppressive practice, and what I call creating braver spaces. Creating braver spaces. As was mentioned in my intro, we'll go to the next slide. I'm from the community of East Preston. I'm grateful to be on Mi'kmaq territory. I live in one of the historic communities of people of African descent in East Preston. And yes. So as I said, I've not experienced homelessness. But the photo you see there on the chair, that's me. At about 18 months with my older sister, who was about 3 and a half. We're on a chair in our yard. So we grew up in absolute poverty. What was I even doing sitting on that chair at 18 months with my sister? When I found this picture a few years ago, I started using it because it serves as a reminder to me of growing up in poverty, born into racism, born into poverty, born into a life where sexism was dominant, born into a capitalist society, born into a space where I was not expected to even finish high school, let alone go on to university, let alone end up in the Senate of Canada. So for me, this photo is a reminder. It's a reminder, not that I need reminders. My grandsons tell me all the time, Nanny, we know you grew up in poverty. You don't have to keep reminding us of it. But I want to make sure that they understand that life, that the experiences that we have now are only coming about because people have led the change they wanted to see. We are standing, I admit, I acknowledge that I stand on the shoulders of my ancestors who fought for basic rights. When I think of homelessness and I think of my connection to that topic, first of all, housing is a basic human right. And so if I'm an advocate for human rights, then I'm an advocate for homelessness. I may not frame it in that way. And although I've never had the lived experience of homelessness, I know what it's like to live in a house that doesn't have, that's substandard. We had a lot of love in our home. We had a lot of opportunity, but we didn't have a lot of money, and sometimes we didn't have enough food to go around for everyone. When my father was killed in a tragic car accident when I was 12 years old, that same sister and I, we helped our mother with the younger siblings in our family. And there were 12 of us, 10 children born to our parents and 2 grandchildren that they were raising without support. But because my father was killed, we were seen as deserving poor. And as the deserving poor, and you know, this wasn't yesterday, obviously, but we still had these distinctions between deserving and undeserving poor. And as deserving poor, we were given some opportunities. My sister and I, and one of our cousins, we were the first people from our community to go to university and complete a degree. Back in the 60s, late 60s. There's something fundamentally wrong with that picture when you think about the fact that we've been in this country since the 1700s. But because we were seen as the deserving poor, we were given a bit of help. We were given a bit of a leg up, an arm up, a hand up, whatever, handout, whatever you want to call it. People helped us to break barriers because we were seen as deserving poor. I've worked in social work now for over 50 years. I've never met a person who was poor who decided that that's what they were going to be. You know, I'm going to grow up and be poor one day. That's really what I want to do. I'm going to grow up and be homeless one day. People are where they are often because of all of the other issues and barriers that are in their way. So whether you're deserving or undeserving, I think we need to get rid of those kind of categories. Poverty is poverty. And people talk about children living in poverty. I'm sorry, children don't live in poverty. Their parents do. So let's call it what it is. Call it what it is. We'll go to the next slide. I bring my social work lens to the Senate. I bring all of who I am to the Senate, whether people like it or not. And sometimes people don't like it, because sometimes I talk about issues that make people feel a little uncomfortable. And if me talking about racism makes you feel a little uncomfortable, it's too bad. If me talking about poverty makes you feel a little uncomfortable, too bad. If me talking about intersectionality and how important it is to our work, if that makes you feel a little uncomfortable, too bad. I'm going to continue to do the work that I do and bring this lens of intersectionality, bring the lens of intersecting identities into that work because it's important. And for many people, it may be the first time they're seeing things that way. But I invite people to bring that lens, and I invite all of you to continue to do that work with bringing a lens of intersectionality to the work. We'll go to the next slide. Understanding your own social location is so very important. One of the things I've been here all morning, I've been moving around in different sessions in the lived experience room, in the elders room. I've spent time just talking with people who've attending the conference, some people who helped organize the conference. And what I have found really interesting is that people bring themselves into the spaces. And one of the things that I think is really important that all of us do, we need to understand our social location because that's who we are. And we work from those spaces wherever we are. We talk about the intersection of power and privilege. And so no matter where you are, you're dealing with one or more of these realities. So I think it's very easy for us to locate our oppression. Not so easy for us to locate our privilege. And if we're not aware of the privilege that we hold, or maybe not even being aware that we have some privilege at all, then there's the potential to abuse it, to misuse it, or to not effectively use it. So I want you to think about your own social location. Where do you fall on this wheel? We'll go to the next slide, please. So here's a question I want you to think about in the moment, but also when you leave here. When you leave here and you go back to your homes, you go back to your organizations, you go back to the places where you live and where you work. But I want you to think about your social location. And I want you to think about how your social location impacts the way you interact with people, but also the way in which your social location impacts how people around you interact with you. Sometimes we want to put it all out there. Issues belong to someone else. But what do we own? What are we bringing into the spaces? And what are we taking from those spaces? We'll go on. There's been a lot of talk over the last few days at this conference about a change agenda, the crisis of homelessness, and how do we move things? How do we move the needle? The speaker this morning talked about moving the needle a little bit and how we can all have a role in that, and I absolutely agree with him. When I think about change, I think about how we make changes in all of the spaces where we are. So whether or not it's our personal space or the professional spaces, I don't know if I have some kind of magnet that draws social workers to me, but I've talked to a lot of social workers here today. And as social workers, we're supposed to, there's two schools of thought around social work. Some people see social work as being about social change, and some people see social work as being about social control. And I think those who work from that social control lens have done a lot of harm in our communities. And those are not social workers that I've taught. I think I've got some former students in this room. And you know that I advocate for social workers to be about social change, to use your professional positions to fight for social change. But it can't be something that you only do from 9 to 5. It is not something you do when you put on your work outfit and you go to work and you do your work and then you come home and you're a different person. We need these 4 Ps to be working together. So the personal and the professional and the political. And I'm not talking, big P politics and partisan politics. I'm talking about the politicization of our issues and our realities. One of the issues with homelessness and why it hasn't had much of a priority is because it's not seen as a political hot issue. People who live in homelessness, who live without homes, who are living on the margins and living on the streets, they're not seen as people who are going to make the decisions in terms of the next election. But we need to start seeing everyone differently. We need to politicize homelessness a little bit more than we have been. I don't know what's holding us back. Why haven't we tried to make homelessness more of a political issue? Now, next year, you're going to be in Ottawa, the seat of federal politics. I'm going to invite you to be a bit more politically engaged around homelessness issues. There's a protest on the Hill every single day, but I've never seen a protest about homelessness. Really. And I've been a senator now for 7 years. I've never seen a protest about homelessness. So maybe we'll see one in 2024. Don't tell anyone you heard me say that here. But I may see you in a protest. We have to do this. So we bring the personal, we bring the professional, we bring the political, and that's what will lead to better policy development and better policy implementation and better policy direction. There should be no one homeless in Canada. It should be a national disgrace that we have anyone in this country that's homeless. It should absolutely be a national disgrace. And that's what makes it a political issue. That's what makes it a political issue. Let's go to the next slide. We need to create change in our workplace, and we can do that by positive disruption. Let's not maintain the status quo. We can't afford to maintain the status quo. I heard someone say, well, part of why we're in this current crisis is because we've been maintaining the status quo. Because we've had this messaging around that comes out of that capitalist agenda around survival of the fittest, and this expectation that we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And if you do that, everything will be all right. Not recognizing some of the root causes of homelessness. Not recognizing the root causes of poverty and not being willing to address those root causes, not being willing to do some basic things like a guaranteed livable income. Imagine what that would do in this country. Let's engage in that critical reflection. And from there, we can lead change. Let's go to the next slide. We also need to, I think, pay more attention to addressing homelessness at that intersection of oppression. The intersections matter. One of the things that I've seen that's been really positive here through your conference is the attention to Indigenous realities, having the elders. I sat in the elders' room. I talked with some of the elders, having the elders' council, having that engagement with the Indigenous communities, I think is phenomenal. That's recognizing that intersection. But I've also heard from some people of African descent who are here, who feel invisible, who feel that their voices haven't been heard. I hear that there was what do they call it, a Black caucus held yesterday. Spur of the moment, Black caucus met and they engaged. They didn't wait for an invitation. That's positive disruption. That's a really good example of positive disruption. Pulling people together to talk about common interest and issues of concern at that intersection of race and homelessness. So paying attention to those intersections. Displacement. You know, we've heard a lot of, we know there's been a lot of displacement. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Incarceration. When people are, we've heard a lot about the school to prison pipeline. And then there's a prison, and there's also a child welfare to prison pipeline. And then there's a pipeline from prison to homelessness. Because we're not doing what needs to happen when folks are incarcerated. We're not addressing the root causes that lead to incarceration. And we're not, in this country, we're not doing rehabilitation in prisons. And so if you have people housed in prison for years, basically, for the most part, doing nothing, not having any kind of engagement, not having any focus on rehabilitation, what do you expect will happen when they come out? And then we complain. We have these educational inequities. We have employment inequities. I've heard many people talk about frontline and the absence of frontline workers, even at this conference, because it's not accessible. So how do we create this kind of spaces so we address the inequities? Mental health and addictions, huge issues. Not enough supports, not enough resources. So we could look at those intersections. Transphobia, huge issues. Homophobia, huge issues. So looking at those intersections around homelessness, I think will help us push the needle a little bit further. We'll go to the next slide. We think about the history of displacement in Canada. We know there's been a history of displacement in terms of Indigenous peoples. We know that there's a history of displacement with people of African descent. And that's at the core of homelessness with these two communities. We know that colonization, we're still dealing with colonization. We're still dealing with issues of trafficking. We're still dealing with issues of enslavement. Because although the physical enslavement ended back in 1834, anti-Black racism didn't. You might even say it took root. And that's the root, the foundation of anti-Black racism that we're dealing with today. In recent history, one of the most recent issues is the story of Africville. And I saw in your program, some of you may have gone to visit Africville. historic displacement. And so displacement, is, of course, is one of the reasons why we have issues with homelessness. Some people talk about immigration and global displacement. Canada is very welcoming, but it's not welcoming for everybody. Let's be clear about that, right? So Canada can be very welcoming for people who are globally displaced, but again, we have differential treatment. And so when we have these kind of inequities in our work, we'll see these kind of problems on the ground. We'll go to the next slide. So I believe that one of the things that we can do to help is to create braver spaces. Some people talk about safe spaces. I say, look, there's no such thing as safety. There's no such thing as safety. For me, as an African Nova Scotian woman, there is no safety. I was telling a colleague of mine how I'd come home very late on a Thursday night from Ottawa, and I'd get a taxi from the airport, and some taxi drivers would be, the minute I say, they say, where are you going? I say, I'm going to East Preston. You could feel them tense up. I could feel the tension. I feel them tense up. One night in the middle of the winter, my driveway is about a quarter of a mile long, and one night in the middle of the winter, a taxi driver wanted to leave me at the side of the road with my luggage because he was afraid if he went down into my driveway, he may never get out. It wasn't because of snow. You know what I'm saying? So there's no safety. But that doesn't mean you're silent. It means you find the courage to be brave, to speak up and speak out when it doesn't feel safe to do so. That's all the more reason to speak up and speak out. Audre Lorde said, your silence will not protect you, and that's absolutely right. So there's no guarantee for us. And it takes a lot of courage. It takes courage to focus on those 4 Ps: the personal, the professional, the political, and the policy. It takes courage to do that. As I was saying earlier, I don't know any person who has experienced homelessness or is currently experiencing homelessness who's chosen to do that. It's rooted in these structural determinants of health. These are not choices. These are not choices. And as I said, we need to be ashamed in Canada for having even one person living on the streets. We'll go to the next slide. But I want to leave you with a sense of critical hope, because I think there's a lot of hope. When I think about some of the courageous things that people have done, just this past week, for example, I heard about this group in Lower Sackville. What are they called? Gated Community Association. Is anyone here from that organization? Maybe not. I thought I heard someone say something. These people stood up and took action because they felt it was important to do so, because they saw people living in tents that were flooded out because of the floods that we were having. One of your sessions was on climate change and the impact on communities. Climate change and the impact on homeless people is something we need to be really concerned about. Those people in Sackville stepped up and said, we're going to do something about this. They didn't sit around waiting for someone. So it's hopeful actions, which is built on your critical analysis of the situation. So we see this AAA, awareness, you become aware, analysis, you do the analysis, and then 3, you do the action, being an agent of change. So finding the strength to move forward. And I think when we do that, we can absolutely lead the change we want to see. We can lead the change we want to see. Let's go to the last slide. So when you think about change, and I'm sure in these past 3 days, you've all been thinking about things that you'd like to see differently in your communities. And I just want to remind you that change is both an individual and a collective responsibility. We all have a role. So it's not enough to say, you know, some people sort of wait for change to happen. Some people watch things happen. You know, you have this wait and see kind of, you know, I'm going to see what they do over there and see how that goes. But there are those people who make change happen. And we all have a role, we all have a responsibility, and we all have the capacity to make change happen. We just need to be brave enough and bold enough to do that. Make the shifts. If we think about our work, think about that anti-oppressive and that human rights lens, if we think about bringing those lenses to the work, we can create braver spaces. We can make that change happen. And I think if we allow critical hope to drive our work, so if we think about critical hope and we bring that critical hope into the work and we collectively work to end homelessness, I don't think we're going to end homelessness, quite frankly, until we bring in a guaranteed livable income. So I'm going to build on this morning's keynote. I'm sorry, I forget his name and I lost my booklet, so I can't look it up. Who was the speaker this morning, the plenary speaker? David. I heard David. So David suggested that you make calls when you leave here. I'm going to add to that. Don't just talk about, when you contact your elected officials, don't just talk about ending homelessness. Ask why they haven't supported a guaranteed livable income. You know, think about COVID. Think about how quickly things happened with CERB. And things happened quickly. And we're still having a debate about whether or not a guaranteed livable income is something we should even seriously consider. And I believe that that's rooted in that whole issue around deserving and undeserving poor. And so until you change people's attitudes, so when you make those calls to your MPs, your MLAs, and your elected municipal councillors, talk to them about a guaranteed livable income and ask them why they don't support it. Who's here from PEI? You're starting a pilot. You have a pilot going in PEI. And I hope that we can take some lessons from what you're doing there. But I want to invite you to allow critical hope to drive your work. And collectively, we will end homelessness. And if you go to the last slide, some people ask me for my business card and I don't have it, but there's my email. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me okay? There we go. All right, so yeah, we have some work to do over the next year before the next conference, and if it makes people uncomfortable, too bad. Please join me again in thanking Senator Bernard for her remarks. Now, before we move forward, I need to just mention that you'll all be receiving a feedback survey for your thoughts on the conference. We definitely want to hear how great your experience was and also how we can make it even better for next time. So please look for that in your email and fill it out. We really appreciate the contributions. So my last job today is to introduce Tim Richter. And I know you're all thinking, who? But I didn't receive a bio, so I asked his staff to tell me some things about Tim that I want to share with you. When people ask what an Aries is like, I say, like Tim Richter. I have never been more impressed with Tim as a leader as when something goes wrong. Anyone can look good when the ship is sailing on calm waters. It's when the storm comes that true leadership emerges. Tim sucks at mini golf and has cheated at it. Tim is a great collaborator for the homelessness and housing sector, as he is able to see the forest from the trees and always drive towards the end goal of lifting people up out of their economic struggles. He has a plan and a vision and gets inspiration from those around him. That is his strength. On Tuesday, Tim was dressed very youthfully, and that was confusing to me. Sometimes Tim's aims seem overly ambitious, but he always seems to find a way to make it a reality. He works tirelessly and strategically in the background to move things forward, helping to shape policy in Canada. He has funny observations and great sayings. Tim, all you.
I don't always cheat at mini golf, but I'm not good at counting. Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're coming to the end of our time together. I want to thank Senator Bernard as well for a really remarkable keynote and lots for us to think about. So, who had a great time? By a show of hands, who learned something that they're going to take home and use? That's what we wanted. Thank you. That's exactly what we were hoping to achieve. But more importantly, we were hoping that you would feel reconnected and re-energized. This morning's Strong Woman song was such a powerful and emotional demonstration of our connection and the strength of our movement. Just after our morning plenary, I was chatting with someone, and she said that this conference has been a powerful antidote to burnout, and that was music to my ears. I know that I, for one, will be jumping on the plane tomorrow, feeling a lot more hopeful, re-energized, and inspired. I'm feeling inspired and recharged and frankly, really, really happy, and I'm really grateful that I get to share this work with all of you. And speaking of grateful, and putting on a conference like this requires a lot of help from a lot of people, and we have a lot of people to thank. I want to begin by thanking the good people of Halifax. We've been really blessed with an amazing host committee led by Pam Glode DeRoche and the McMoney Friendship Center and Sarah Napier of the United Way of Halifax. Poor Sarah put in an absolute mountain of work over the last year to get ready for the conference, only to get knocked up by COVID over the weekend. And so let's maybe send Sarah some healing vibes and our best wishes and thanks. I want to thank the superb team at the Halifax Convention Center for such great service and hospitality. They've been really, really great to work with and super accommodating and flexible, and I really do appreciate that. I want to give special thanks to Jeff Nearing of the Discover Halifax, who's really gone above and beyond to support us. I want to thank the 80 volunteers and the volunteer coordinator, Peter Ordinelli, from the United Way, and to thank all of our exhibitors. We can't hold this conference without a great host, and I think that we can all agree Halifax has been really, really wonderful. I want to extend a warm thank you to our elders, knowledge keepers, and traditional people who have joined us this week. We're honored by your presence, and I thank you for the gift of your wisdom. And I want to give a special thank you to Elder Debbie Eisen, who you'll hear from again in a minute, who poured her heart and soul into this event and has done it with great loving kindness. So thank you, Debbie. Thank you to our sponsors. It wouldn't be possible to hold this conference without sponsors who help us keep the registration as low as humanly possible. And we will continue to try to keep this and make the conference more and more accessible, helping make this a braver, a more welcoming space. Thank you. To our friends with lived experience, I want to thank you for joining us, and I hope that the conference is more and more keeping with the mantra, nothing without us. And to this, I want to add a thank you to all of you. It's your in your registration, you paid an inclusion fee that makes it possible for us to offer scholarships and bursaries toward our goal of having at least 10% of conference attendees people with lived experience. So thank you. I know that this is not cheap to come to a conference, and I appreciate your willingness to support our lived experience friends and neighbors. I also want to thank and acknowledge all of the stream leads and partner organizations that helped us build the program. Again, the conference is built in partnership, and so thank you to the Lived Experience Leadership Network, the Right to Housing Network, the National Alliance to End Rural and Remote Homelessness, the Women's National Housing and Homelessness Network, the Canadian Network for Health and Housing of People Experiencing Homelessness, the National Housing First Network, Community of Practice, Away Home Canada, and the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness. And finally, I want to thank my team. I'm really so blessed to work with the greatest group of people who make going to work a joy every day. I'm hoping that our team will stand up for a minute just so we can see where you are. I know you're around, or did they all skip out? All right, you see a few around the room. Thank you to everyone. I want to, on the team, I want to give a special thank you to Matthew Wu and Andrew Burns, who are standing over in the corner. They have, as I said at the beginning, if everything goes well, it's because they did it. If anything gets screwed up, it's because I got myself in the way of it. So on Wednesday, I said, I have an unbending faith that homelessness will end because of all of you. My faith in that homelessness will end has been tested over the years, as I'm sure it has for many of you, but it's never been lost. But I will take away from this week not just that faith, but renewed determination and energy to get there, and I've drawn that from all of you. You are, as I said on Wednesday, a light of kindness, of love, of grace in dark times for people who are really hurting. You are consistently out there offering hope and a helping hand out of darkness. Thank you. I want you to know that your work is seen, it is valued, and I hope you know that you are not alone. Thank you for being those beacons of light and hope for those that suffer the indignity and injustice of homelessness. Thank you for believing in the dream of ending homelessness and working every day to make that a reality. We're at a really unique and perilous time. On one hand, more and more people are being thrown into homelessness. On the other, in 40 years, we haven't had a better moment to reverse those policies that created this disaster. And as the senator said, let's make homelessness political. I want to close with the words of eminent philosopher and poet Bruce Springsteen. After 9/11, Springsteen wrote a song called Into the Fire. As you might guess, I'm a bit of a Springsteen fan. As a tribute to first responders after 9/11. And the song talks about how love and duty called them someplace higher up the stairs of the World Trade Center and into the fire. The song always makes me think of you, makes me think about how the same love and duty calls you to the hard, anxious, awful, and beautiful work of ending homelessness. And the chorus of the song is a tribute to you. The chorus is, may your strength give us strength. May your faith give us faith. May your hope give us hope, and may your love give us love. With your strength, faith, hope, and love, homelessness will end. Thank you. And And I'd now like to invite Elder Debbie Eisen to the stage to close with a prayer.
Well, I have had the most amazing 3 days of my life. And I tell you, with the amount of hugs that I've gotten the last 3 days, I would like to put each one of them in an envelope and send it out to all of those people who are living in encampments and all of those people who need a hug just to get them going through the day. And I think that I would have enough to send it across Turtle Island and hug everyone. But it is my great honor to do the closing prayer for us and send you on your way. But before I do that, I would like to acknowledge the organizers of this homelessness conference today, because they've been there for us and have done everything they can to include the Indigenous culture, our Indigenous spirituality, and in the way that makes us feel that we are welcomed and that our words are heard. So Chimigwich for that. Thank you very much. I would like to also acknowledge the table of elders here who are my new friends. I felt that I've learned so much the past 3 days as well. So Chimigwich to all of you as well. But also, a lot of the things that I plan and a lot of things that I do, you can't do something alone. We can't end the homelessness alone. We can't do the things that we do alone. And the same is for me and the work that I do. So I have 3 people from the Friendship Center, Trina and Denise and Monique, are always there to help me and do the things that I need to do whenever I need it. They're always there, whether I'm asking them to work a 15-hour day with me or come in at 6:30 in the morning. They draw the line at coming in with me at 5 because I'm old and I don't sleep, so I go to work. Thank you very much. Chimigwich. So if I could ask everyone to stand, and I will close off this amazing conference and allow you to go back to your family and friends. I will pray in my way, but I invite each and every one of you here to pray in the way that is good for your heart and good for your soul. Anibujo nana temakus indejanakas no mayanganaway anishnabe kwe bachawana. Creator, we start by thanking you for the beautiful weather that you have given us today. It ignites the fire in our bellies to move ahead with yet another day. And we thank you, Creator, for the fresh, crisp winds that have blown to help cleanse Mother Earth of her toxins. We also thank you and we say, Miigwech, Creator, for helping us to open our hearts and our minds with clarity and understanding and compassion for the information and words that we heard during the past 3 days. We pray, Creator, for our loved ones and family who are sick and need your help and strength and guidance in the days ahead. And for our family members who are preparing themselves for their final journey to you, we ask, Creator, that you welcome them with open arms. I pray, Creator, that you follow each and every one of these men and women as they travel back to their communities and their family and friends and loved ones, helping them to get there safe and sound. And for our doctors, nurses, firefighters, police officers, and paramedics who work so hard day in and day out, protecting our way of life not only here in Jabukduk, but across Turtle Island. We ask that you give them energy and strength so they continue with their work that is much needed. And lastly, Creator, for our veterans, those men and women who are far from home, protecting our way of life here on Turtle Island, we ask that you keep them safe and free from harm till they return back to Turtle Island and back to the loving arms of their family and their friends. Mset Nogama, Tahomigwech, Ahau. Thank you.